What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and to continue my brand new series of classic movie reviews, I'm here to let you know that A Hard Day's Night is no perfect movie, and it follows the Beatles trying to adjust to their newfound fame over the course of a day and a half as they prepare for a live televised concert. And if any of you seriously have never heard of the Beatles, get the hell out of here, because I'm not explaining it. Now, I was excited to see this movie not just because I am a big Beatles fan, even though I love a good chunk of their songs, but I was also surprised that for a feature debut about a band playing themselves, it's considered one of the best musical movies, one of the best comedy adventure movies, and it's described as being a big influencer among not just movies centered around musicians, but just overall rock documentaries. And watching this movie, there are so many filmmaking techniques that were considered innovative around the time because filmmakers were just getting used to trying out new cinematic tricks. And because audiences don't really watch movies chronologically by order of release, sometimes it's not really going to translate as being new and innovative when you're watching it for the first time 56 years later, which is what I did. Some of these techniques are so commonplace in modern movies nowadays that people are going to look at this and they can still sift through it because even though it is old fashioned, it has a certain relevance in regards to the filmmaking and the script. And while I don't think it's one of the best musicals, one of the best comedies, or really that much of a game changer personally, there's still a lot of entertaining, subtle, and very charming and non conventional things that happen in this movie. For starters, it goes without saying, if you're a Beatles fan, you're going to love the musical sequences throughout this movie. The majority of them play out just like A Star is Born. In fact, all of them play out kind of like A Star is Born, where the musical numbers are either the band performing as a group, or there are a bunch of these comedic montages where the music is in the background and you're seeing the Beatles run away from fans or run around and frolic in the free space that they have during the free time that they have, which were my favorite moments in particular. The montages were so hilarious, they were fast paced, they had a lot of really good visual humor. And part of what elevated it was the way that Richard Lester sped up characters running so quickly. It added to the pacing of the jokes. It added to just how urgent the situations were for this band trying to get away from as many batshit crazy fans as they possibly could. And it was easy to laugh at them because of the situation that they're in. But what really surprised me about this movie was as I was listening to the songs, I kept thinking that there were some reoccurring themes going on, but I couldn't wrap my head around it until I did a little bit of research about what some of these songs were based on in terms of the feelings that the bandmates had as they wrote them. And then it hit me. This movie actually found a way to make the songs, in regards to either their lyrics or the song titles, kind of serve as a commentary for the Beatles' emotional journey over the course of this movie. Choosing A Hard Day's Night as the intro song, as the closing song to bookend the whole journey, and as the title is really effective because the overall theme of A Hard Day's Night is kind of the overall theme of this movie. These characters as a band are going through so many new challenges and hardships now that they're super famous, but in the end, it's worth it for them because they love performing music together as a group and they're shocked and amazed, but still incredibly grateful that there are so many people who love their music, the music that they put so much effort in. And that was a big surprise for me personally, the way that this movie takes real life figures and portrays them in a fictional setting while still presenting a realistic portrayal of the personal and professional strengths and weaknesses of what it's like to constantly undergo fame. Part of that comes from the way Richard Lester directs the overall movie. It has a handheld documentary style that was very new to the late 60s in regards to overall movie making. There are so many scenes where characters are talking, and as soon as one's finished and then it moves on to the other, the camera will pan back and forth to each character in an improvised documentary fashion as opposed to just cutting back and forth between each character. During the concert sequences, it has a lot of quick cutting, rapid fire editing that I was hesitant at first because it's so easy to fuck that up cinematically. But then I realized seeing so many screaming, obsessed fans in a matter of seconds over a variety of cuts really puts you in the band's shoes of what it's like to be constantly followed around 24/7. And that's the other great strength of this movie, the way these characters are written. The Beatles work best in this movie as an overall group as opposed to individual characters. There are a couple of them who get more depth over others, but it's kind of earned, and I'll get to that later. But now that the Beatles are famous, at least in the timeline that this movie takes place, they have so many expectations that are placed upon them where it really does feel like they're working 24/7. They have to respond to every single letter of fan mail that they get in a given night on the exact night they get it. They have to be cooped up in their hotel room or in their recording studio whenever they're not cooped up in a car being chased by the crazy fans. Their managers are so strict among them and feel as if they're responsible for these guys, not just because of their professional careers, their livelihoods as music managers, but because the band members are relatively young. They're new to this, and they want to make sure that they can protect their new clients as much as possible. And that's where the management characters, that's where the meat of their personality traits and their character arcs are. They're not really a central focus, if I'm being honest, but if they're not the central focus and you pick up on those traits very quickly, it's a very subtle touch in regards to the writing. But whenever the Beatles rebel against their management, whenever they leave a certain area they're not supposed to just for the sake of going around, running, frolicking, meeting other people who either don't recognize them or recognize them but are completely obsessed and just see them as regular people, you don't look down on them for being rebellious. If anything, you root for them because all they really want is to take a few moments of their life to just be themselves, not to be people that they're supposed to pretend to be like. Two of my favorite scenes in particular is this one montage where they're just running around in a field goofing off and the song playing in the background is Money Can't Buy Me Love. And Paul McCartney has said in interviews they probably should have called it Money Can Buy Me Love because from his experiences, fame and fortune will absolutely do that. But it's just an example of how, because of how overscheduled and busy and stressed out they are, it's great to see them do absolutely nothing just because that's what they feel like in a given moment. Out of all the band members, Ringo Starr especially gets the most fleshed out character arc because, without spoiling anything, he's the one character who really gets to walk around London, experience life, see what other people are doing with their own life. And it's where he comes to this slow and comedically painful situation where no matter how high up or low you are in the food chain in regards to society, your life is going to have as many challenges and hardships as there are positives and strengths. What really matters is that you take what you have and you be thankful for it. And that's what makes him thankful for being part of a group that's loved and appreciated for how good their music is. Paul McCartney also has a minor arc where he's carrying around his granddad throughout the course of the movie, and this granddad is kind of a psychopathic con man who loves to toy off of people just to serve his own financial and personal needs. At one point, he's on the street selling autographed photos that were not signed by them. The granddad is a total bastard, and this character makes it kind of ambiguous whether he is a greedy scoundrel or if he's just insane and doesn't see that what he's doing is completely immoral and is taking advantage of his own grandson who's doing absolutely everything he can to keep him out of trouble. Now, in regards to certain flaws with this movie, it's not a consistently funny movie as I was hoping, mostly because they do take a great deal of time in order to develop the Beatles as a group and in order to give the management a little bit of development to understand why they're being sticks in the mud. They're not being sticks in the mud because they want to. They feel as if they have no choice and it's part of their job. And in some cases it is. But there are so many sequences, especially during the first 20 minutes where they're on a train, that I didn't think they took that many opportunities in order to serve a joke that would elevate the characters and the themes. There's one point where they're hopping from train room to the next train room to look for the granddad, and at one point, the three of them are carrying Paul or John, I'm not entirely sure because they both look alike in this movie, are carrying him by the wayside looking for the granddad. And I thought that was really funny. But it's just a 1 second bit. They don't even take that big of an advantage of it. And there are some jokes that do poke fun at the people who don't follow current events and don't know who they are. And those scenes did demystify and humanize the Beatles as characters. But again, they don't really take that big of an advantage with it. If anything, they play it off more as a dramatic thing where they get into trouble over it, which wouldn't be the worst thing. I mean, so many rock stars have gotten themselves in shitty situations, but again, like, they didn't really take that big of an advantage of it. And I felt like there was more verbal humor than there was visual humor. The running montages where everything is sped up, those were the funniest moments because of how fast paced they are and how they serve the themes of being constantly on the run, almost like fame is imprisoning you. And there's an entire finale involving police that's kind of an homage to the Keystone Cops from the silent era. That part was really funny, and I felt like if there were more moments like that, then it would be a laughing riot. It would be even more subtle, basing the themes on all of this dumb comedy. But no, there's a lot of jokes that sometimes are a little hard to explain because of the Beatles' accents. They hired a writer to write the script based on how he could write Liverpudlian dialogue. At least that's the official term for it. And yeah, during the first half especially, it was a little hard to make out the jokes because their Liverpool accents were that thick. But as you patiently stick with it over the course of this movie, you start to realize just how thoughtful and complex the characters are, especially when this is a comedy about a real-life band. The actors all do really good jobs making fun of themselves. The writer is incredibly subtle and thoughtful in his themes. The music, of course, is a blast to listen to. It doesn't feel spontaneous, and the recordings sound like album recordings as opposed to live recordings, but the music itself is still really fun to listen to, that you don't even care if it's not properly synced up to the actors, which it is once in a while. And Richard Lester proves himself to be a really good comedic director. It's no wonder that he directed this and the Beatles' next movie, Help, among many other underrated comedies. So for all those reasons, I'm going to give A Hard Day's Night a 4 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen A Hard Day's Night, let me know in the comments below what you thought of it. What's your favorite Beatles song or movie? Because I've heard a lot of people who really like Yellow Submarine, and some people like Yesterday incredibly. I thought it was okay. Whatever the case is, let me know below what your favorite Beatles song or movie is. Be sure to stay tuned for more classical reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.